Hello? I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
We can't both be Elissa with April.
Okay,
I was like, wait, which one's me? Which one's me?
that's it. I gotta rename myself now. Um, 2. Yeah. I was trying to have my. I was. Yeah, I'm in a little back corner. So
I
junky.
see. Nobody puts baby in the corner.
I know it's all junky, and I can't even change my background to blur it. So let me see. Choose virtual background. There we go. Blur. Yeah, there we
Yeah,
go.
there you go.
it,
And I don't remember, do we record these calls? I think we do, right?
it is recording right now.
Okay.
And I had just gotten something from Nickel,
Oh boy.
because I don't have like a clear agenda. But there's a letter going out to help. It's the Transformation to Competitive and Integrated Employment Act to help
Hmm.
the minimum wage and support
Oh
fair.
yeah, I just saw that. Yeah.
We just letting people in.
No, not yet, usually, but okay.
Oh,
That
I,
might be the interpreter. I don't know.
I am.
Okay.
all right, all right,
I
we're like,
was just getting ready to see if I could tell who they assigned. So yes, okay. We're
I'll
good to go.
rename myself right now.
what time do you have to leave, Alyssa?
I mean, I can stick around for a bit. I mean, the RCLD meeting starts at 3 as well. They
Oh,
usually do some weird icebreakers, but
oh,
uh,
well, anything for an icebreaker, you know.
right. No, I will not be joining for the ice breaking. But yeah. And I may pop back on after we get through April's portion of it.
And I am, well, hello. How are you? Almost did a,
But they're bringing a bunch of people into the conference as part of the RCLD contract. So
gotcha.
that's the part I need to be there for.
That sounds important. Yes.
Oh my gosh, it's yeah. The hotel's like sold out on Thursday. I'm like, well, they're like, yeah, and we can't add any more rooms. I'm like, the hell you can't. Like, we have rooms on the 9th and the 11th through the 13th or what. I'm like, okay, well, you're gonna need to do something because
So this is like, have you talked to me before? Because if you haven't, you know that
right. Do not make me pull out the big guns. Please don't.
I don't know who Catherine Bognosky is. I know that name.
No, I don't know. We only have, I think, one interpreter, and I don't think I ordered cart for it. I don't think we usually do cart.
Hmm,
So,
Okay.
but it's 3 to the hour, so.
Yeah. And Sidna was going to actually join this time. It was like, you should actually do that, but she's tied up.
Usually Brooke is here and I rely heavily on her to
Mhm.
talk,
Well,
which
yeah.
she's okay with. Shocker,
Um,
I know.
yeah, I'm not really happy with that, but I mean,
But it's better than empty dead air and me trying to figure out how to get people to talk. So
yeah,
as far as
well,
like another board member support, she should be here.
yeah, let's see who all is in the waiting room now. There's a couple. Herschel Jackson, okay.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well,
But yeah,
come on,
I did see the Nichols sub minimum wage letter come out. You thinking
Herschel.
about that for a topic?
Um, yeah, I was thinking that could be. I mean, if they have not signed on, if they can look at it, because I think today is the last day. Oh, deadline is times Friday. Friday is the last day.
Okay.
So our center signed. Well, I signed for our center. Our silk won't. I can't do anything with that because by the time they would decide whether to let me sign or not, deadline would be passed. So
Happy New Year!
I know, right?
Oh boy. Okay, well, I mean, if you're ready, we
Sure.
let them in. Open the gates.
Good afternoon. How are you? We've got a couple AIs in here. Note taking. Okay, that's good. So, Catherine, how are you? I can understand that. Herschel, how are you doing? It's been a while.
Hello, I'm doing fine. Good to see
Good.
you.
Good to see you too. Does anybody have any burning topics to begin with? Advocacy topics, I should say. All right. I don't know if anybody saw it's called the Transformation to Competitive Integrated Employment Act. Nickel sent out an action alert about it. I got that a little while ago. It's to end sub-minimum wages and promote fair, competitive jobs for people with disabilities. And so this act helps ensure that everyone with a disability gets fair pay and equal opportunities. So they're hoping that they can get signatures from either centers or silks. And if you get any type of action alert from Nickel, you should have gotten that. I don't know, Elissa, do we by chance have that on our website? I didn't see it earlier.
Probably not. It's fine. Not on the website, though I'm sure it is included in the email blasts that go out, probably.
Okay. the deadline to sign is this Friday at 5 p.m. If you need your board or the executive director of whether you're part of a silk or a center to look at it, see what it's all about, you have till Friday at 5 p.m. to sign your center or silk to that letter. And Jessica Bedez from Nickel is the one that sent that out. So anything I think that we can help to do to help have fair pay for people with disabilities, and better job opportunities, ending the sub-minimum wage, I think is a great thing, and actually have competitive jobs. So there's that. That was like something that just came out though, so you might not have seen that. I don't know if either one of you did.
I dropped it in the chat, Don. This is Elissa.
You're so wonderful. Thank you.
Ditto. Thank you.
Otherwise, as we're heading into the fall season and we are getting closer to October, Disability Employment Awareness Month, right? I think, there are a lot of things that are happening advocacy-wise in different parts of the nation for disability employment. Illinois always seems to be a state, Herschel, that does do a lot for disability employment. But I'm seeing more states doing a lot of things for this October, and nationally. Even, the federal government's trying to do a big push on competitive employment. Is there anything that is going on locally or nationally that you know about that you want to talk about?
This is Herschel. I don't have the details totally yet, but I do know that I have been talking with some of the local PR representatives, and their office is going to be planning an event. That'll be a Disability Awareness Month event. And I believe it will be in October. I know that they're working on that now and getting the plans in the works, and I'll be partnering with them. We will be partnering with them. So we should be hearing from them soon about that.
Awesome. We will be interested in hearing more about that. Thank you. And Elissa, during I just lost it too, but I had it. We're still taking nominations for Linda Gonzalez Award, or has that stopped?
Correct. It's still open. Yes.
Okay. So if you know any youth that have been great, and so the requirements are, I'll let you do you probably have the spiel down, right?
Wait. No.
Oh, okay. So am I putting you on the spot? I'm sorry.
All good.
I will. I just had it up too here. Okay, and it's not here. Now I have a picture of Joan. Let me see. That's not the Joan Award. So it's the Linda Gonzalez Award, but now I have, okay. So my phone.
It's up. I'll grab it. It's the Linda Gonzalez Award for Outstanding Rural Youth. And Linda Gonzalez was the first executive director of April and was instrumental in championing
Yeah.
the youth movement and bringing youth into April. April created 2 youth board seats on our board of directors. And Linda was just very she wanted to pass the torch to youth. So when she left April, she retired and has since passed away. And we have we created the Linda Gonzalez Award for Outstanding Rural Youth. And they are recognized at our annual conference every year. So if you know of a dynamic youth who is, part of a SIL or SILK that's a member of April, that assists with youth with disabilities in rural America, a steadfast commitment to the improvement and growth of independent living mission and philosophy, then please do consider, nominating them for this award. It's an award. There's a small, well, $500 monetary award. And so, yeah, it's a really, I'm biased, of course, because Linda's who hired me, but she was just, she was an amazing, amazing woman, just full of love and kindness, and lived and breathed IL, and just, thought the world of youth. So much so that we, have incorporated youth into April on the board, on our staff, and
Part of the
at the
conference.
conferences. Yeah.
I would say that actually draws a lot of people to the conference because of the youth conference itself. Wouldn't you?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have a large contingency of youth that come every year. And then April received Ford Foundation money to specifically bring youth to the conference. So we have a couple programs. We have our general youth scholarship application, and then we have the Lead On program. And so we're bringing in quite a few folks under both, quite a few youth.
And even if you don't know anybody to nominate, the fact that we do so much with youth, I mean, youth are such strong advocates that I'd like to see more youth actually on this committee too. Because, they are the ones that, take over when we're gone, and they seem to be louder and more powerful than a lot of us, although I think some of us are loud in a good way.
Right. I'm going to jump off, Don, but I anticipate being back shortly.
All right. Thank you. We'll see you in a bit.
Thank you.
So otherwise, I don't know if anybody has signed up for the webinar tomorrow, expanding access to personal care assistance. That is such from Catherine. Youth advocates, or what we call bridging generations, are so important. Is absolutely. I 100% agree. Thank you, Catherine. The expanding access to personal care assistance is tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern. It's a grassroots webinar for rural Americans with disabilities. That is something that so many states are grappling with. I think every state, rural and urban, but advocacy is such a huge part of that too, and many times not being heard, not being people don't understand why that's so important for people with disabilities, unless if legislators or HHS people actually have a lived experience themselves, or somebody who has a relative that actually needs those personal care assistants or attendants or personal care, whatever they do call it. I mean, everybody calls it something different, but all in all, there is such a gap and such a need that the advocacy has to be sustained and has to be continuous, that we don't stop voicing that need for that. And it's hard to actually start programs. In Iowa, up in Northwest Iowa, we are losing more people to fast food jobs than want to work as a personal care attendant, right? Because they're not having to do lifting, they're not having to do things that people with disabilities need on a daily basis, and they will get benefits at fast food jobs now, where a lot of these other places will not give that to them. And so I can see why they do a switch, because it's better for them. We need to make that better for the people with disabilities. Need these things. This is life. This is living. And that's what I always tell our legislators. How can you put a person's life over the amount of money and benefits that you're willing to give for somebody who's going to be helping them? We need to make it fair and equitable for everybody involved. And it seems to hit a brick wall many times. It depends on who you're talking to. I don't know if somebody has a really good story about that, really good plan in place, or anything about advocacy towards that you want to share. Or anything else as far as advocacy going. Herschel.
Yeah, I was at a meeting recently. It was probably about a month ago or so with April, and the state of Iowa and HHS was providing a tour throughout the state, and they were also giving a town hall meeting. And at that town hall, they were talking about senior citizens, different age groups, and all of the different plans. There was about 10 different strategies that they had been working on, and trying to get all the different departments involved together that are in that state. And so we did discuss that locally. That was one of the big discussions, at least. And we also talked about assistance, personal care assistance, at-home care for the aging population, and where they can get that type of help. And so we did talk a lot about that, and about how the state is being a little bit more involved and how they're preparing a little bit better and setting plans up for people with disabilities as well. And yeah, we did discuss that a lot. There was a lot of discussion on that topic. So I know that at the town hall, there was a lot of discussion about what's happening locally, but also the state too. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see how that works out.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm hoping, because like Iowa is changing our DSD from folk rehab to DHS, and it kind of scares me because I don't know what they're going to be like. But I've talked to them about personal care assistance and what they need to actually do to help make all of our centers be, not only expand our capabilities for people with disabilities, but to actually understand it's not just people who are aging in place that need that is people with disabilities, and not rely on the ADRCs, but rely on us. It has to be the centers that also are able to do that. I mean, doing the ADRCs or the AAAs are not going to be the only places. People come to us for a reason. And if we just ship them off to someplace else, nothing gets done. And then they come back. So we need to actually be a solution, not a referral place only. And so I'm hoping that we actually can have good conversations that way. And Aries Franklin, I have not seen you for a while, and I bet you have some information. Are you able to unmute, Aries? Maybe not. Okay. Well, Aries, if you want to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were talking to me, Don. How have you been?
What? Good. Been a while.
I know, right? I thought I'd just pop in and see what everybody is doing.
We're wanting to know what you're doing with it.
You said what now?
I want to know what you're doing about advocacy, where you're at.
Oh, right now I'm doing the same things. I'm fighting with our local public transportation here about trying to make it accessible for the winter here, because they tend to put all of the snow berms on the sidewalks and in front of the bus stops, and so we have to stand in the street. And we had a blind, visually impaired person get hit about 2 years ago, and then I almost got hit last year. And so I've literally been fighting with them and trying to figure out a way we can make it accessible. I have also been talking to the city about getting some of the sidewalks and streets accessible in Spokane. We've also been a part of some walk audits here. And so just trying to take it one step at a time. A little bit further higher up, and they pulled her off. Yeah, I've been, and then I'm working on trying to get some advocacy for the refugees and immigrant communities here. We've partnered with the Refugee and Immigrant Connections of Spokane, and also a local restaurant called Feast, which is a restaurant that takes immigrants who come from other countries and want to be chefs and allow them to learn what it's like to run a business. So the chefs here are from different countries. The menu changes every day. And so it's just a way to get them acclimated to the business, and they open their own restaurant. So we've been working with them from a disability standpoint, doing a lot of independent living skills training for the refugee families that come into Spokane. And so yeah, I've been trying to stay busy.
You always do. So but that sounds exciting, really.
Those days of the really high, lots of them will
the refugee population, the immigrant population. I like that, especially. I mean, that's different than what I've heard. So I appreciate that, Arius. Thank you. I appreciate you. So I'm trying to see what else might be coming down the radar for, I mean, I don't know if y'all know that it is National Recovery Month, and, people in recovery are actually part of the disability community, right? And one of the things that we're trying to push here is, I hate to say push, but one of the things we're trying to do is have people realize that, things, people in, well, a lot of people don't realize that people in recovery are in the disability community. They think that they're just people that are an other type of group, right? And I don't know if you've seen that happen. And yes, it is. It's an addiction. It can be caused at birth, even. It's awareness about how that happens and why it happens, but also it's about talking to, like, we go to the different recovery centers and talk about disability and recovery. We talk about LGBT people and recovery. And yes, Herschel, it is also Deaf Awareness Month. I don't know how many people know that either, and I imagine very few, because that isn't made aware too much. I mean, that I've been talking with the National Deaf Center in Texas. You know the National Deaf Center, Herschel, at all? They help a lot of students who are having problems with schools, particularly colleges, and because I have a consumer who has been treated terribly both in high school and now in college because they just refuse to give an interpreter to him. And it's like a fight every day for access to education or to have an equitable education, right? And when he was in high school, it shouldn't have been that way, and had to fight all the time. And it was like, once he gets to college, it's going to be better. And because, you know, we're in a smaller town, thought when he went to a bigger city, then that would solve the problem. And now it's even worse. And in his orientation, you know, we talked to the director of accessibility, did the accommodations, because college is different, right? But on their orientation, they put him with a blind student and said, well, you two both have a disability, so you will be able to get along. A blind student and a deaf student. Can you tell me how that works? Disabilities are not the same. And everybody with a disability is not the same no matter what, but we're suing the college actually right now. So I'm not going to go any further on that, but that is not something that needs to happen, and it shouldn't be ignored, but it happens more often than you think. And that's where advocacy needs to come from different groups of people with disabilities when these things happen, whether if it happens because somebody's deaf, all people who are disabled or have a disability, I should say, still need to stand up for somebody else who is being mistreated and is being refused access, not just people who are deaf, right? It's just like if somebody like myself who has seizures, had seizures, people need to actually realize we're one community. We might have different things that make us unique in our own special way. I hate to use that word special, sorry. But we stand as one when we're wronged, and that is our power, and that's our advocacy. We always need to go towards that. So next week is National Disability Voting Rights Week. Yes, it is. What type of advocacy is being done for that?
So we here in Alabama, the SIL up in North Alabama, Disability Resource Network is going to be holding a luncheon and voter registration and education. They're teaming up with the League of Women Voters on that. The League of Women Voters and now Alabama's chapter of through AAPD dealing with the voting issues.
Mhm.
So
That's good. It's really good because
and also this month, the month of September every year, is set aside as National Preparedness Month in terms of severe weather and other types of preparedness. So
it is. And you've had bad weather this year. We've had bad weather.
yeah, back in January of this year, city of Selma, large parts of downtown Selma got almost blown away by a tornado. So they're still trying to clean up. And
Yeah.
of course, that city of Selma is pretty historic, being the home of the Edmund Pettus Bridge and the birthplace of the Selma to Montgomery Voting Rights March.
Right.
So, and then also going on next week, I'm not going to get to go to that. Next Saturday, the 14th, there's a baseball organization that's coming into town to do a swinging for community inclusion. They're doing a tour on that, and they're going to come do that next Saturday, the 14th, at historical Rickwood Field, the certified oldest still working minor league ballpark in the country. So, or at least in the United States anyway. So, the Alternative Baseball Organization. So they're coming into town to do their swinging for community inclusion. A number of our baseball leagues, miracle leagues here in town, are going to participate in that, even though their season has not started yet for the fall.
Right.
But they'll participate in that. A number of the young people that I go to my day program with at Unless You will participate in that, because they participate in the miracle leagues in their area. So, but yeah, there a lot goes on in the month of September. I follow local Birmingham meteorologist James Spann on Facebook, and he posted last night they're getting ready to do their storm spotter classes for the fall, both
really?
online and in person. So, but I'm not going to be able to, unfortunately, to do that. But and I've just started the Alabama state legislature now is in the process of, on both sides, of pre-filing bills for the 2025 legislative session, and we've got a couple of voting bills up. One pre-filed by Alabama State Representative Adeline Clark out of Mobile, that would allow folks with disabilities across the state to designate somebody to both pick up and return their absentee ballot. So, and of course, right now we in Alabama have Alabama Senate Bill 1, which was signed by Governor Ivey back in late June, going through the court system because it very drastically cut back on what folks now, if a person with a disability tries to ask for help by filling out either the absentee ballot or the affidavit envelope, they could very well face under SB 1 a 10-year prison sentence, and so could the person that helps them.
Right.
Be a Class B felony under SB 1. So that's going through the court system now. League of Women Voters is involved in that suit, as well as the Alabama Disabilities Advocacy Program. And one of the things that I've been doing, I graduated in August. I spent most of this year primarily online, going through the course with ADAP and UCed. So that was, I'm officially a graduate now. Oh,
Well,
man.
that's good.
Yeah.
I have asked Elissa to see about putting out to our membership to see who all is doing like voter registration and other voting events for people with disabilities during like September and October.
Yeah.
That way we will actually have that in one resource for people. I think that would help our membership.
Mm. And I will be back with the folks at April Monday for the monthly emergency preparedness committee meeting. So, but yeah, I spent most of this year, graduated in August from Partners in Policy Making, Alabama. So that was the big thing. And then one of our other advocates, one of the peer advocates up in North Alabama, just graduated from Think Big Alabama, which was put together by Alabama Values and one other group to teach a whole bunch of different things in the advocacy area. So as we begin now to prepare for the 2025 legislative session, I'm also watching for a bill to be pre-filed over in our state Senate. That bill, I think, still being worked on, that would, for the first time ever, put state funding towards better public transit across the state of Alabama. So it will be SB 91. It was originally pre-filed last year and got shut down in committee at the very tail end of the legislative session last year. There were two people in the committee that had signaled that they would vote for it, and it got voted down 6-3. So we are the only state in the country here in Alabama that does not put any funding of any kind towards public transit. That goes back to a piece of legislation, a constitutional amendment that was filed back in the 1960s, filed and passed back in the 1960s by the Alabama Road Builders Association, that said all of our federal and state money had to go to building roads and bridges. And could not go towards transit. So we've been trying to work on that over the last, now this will be the second year once SB 91 is filed. So
Well, I wish you luck on that, and congratulations on graduating those other things. Brooke, I see that you're here. I had missed you.
Hi everyone, Brooke Wilson, Oregon Silk Director. I'm sorry I was late. It was conflicting with the quarterly ACL OILP call, and they presented on a couple different things that I think will be of interest to both, well, primarily to centers. So there's going to be a change to the de minimis, which is the minimum. I don't know why we can't just use normal minimum. De minimis. I don't know. Anyway, indirect cost rates. So historically, it's been 10%. It's increasing to 15%. However, I think what's confusing in all of that is it will go into effect for Part B funds on October 1 of 2024. So in less than a month. However, for Part C awards, it will not go into effect until September 30th of 2025. And that's based on when the awards are made. So October 1, 2024 and September 30, 2025 both fall within federal fiscal year 2025. So those awards will be able to use the new 15% minimum indirect cost rate. However, because Part C awards will be made on September 30th of 2024, that's still considered federal fiscal year 24. So for next year's Part C awards, it won't apply. So that confuses me, and I'm sure I just confused all of you trying to say it as simple as possible. But there hasn't been, I mean, for anybody who's been around in IL, I don't know, 10-ish or so years, maybe 8, there was this big to-do about indirect cost rates about 8 to 10 years ago. Don't quote me on dates. I'm usually really good at numbers, but like a pandemic hit and I lost 4 years and I still haven't been able to figure it all out again. So sometime before the pandemic, several years before the pandemic, there was a lot about indirect cost rates, and everybody had to do one and it had to be approved and all of this. So this will be the first time there is an increase. So that minimum, the minimus word, the minimum has been 10% since we started this, and now they are allowing for 15%, depending on what type of funding it is. So for centers that receive Part B funds and Part C funds, that's where I think we're going to have confusion. You look puzzled, Dawn. You got to go. I probably can't answer your question, but I'll give it a whirl.
I'm just wondering how that actually changes. It doesn't change funding, though.
It doesn't actually change the funding. So, so some folks, some centers have a higher indirect cost rate. That can be based on a lot of different variables. You know, the cost of operating a center in, you know, a more urban metropolitan area. I'll just use like Portland as an example, is more because I live in Oregon. So I'll use Portland, Oregon, not Portland, Maine. It costs more to the infrastructure of having a center, rent, utilities, insurance, things of that nature may cost more in an urban area. So their indirect cost rate might be higher. But let's say you have a center that's in a more rural area, and I'll just use like Klamath Falls. And so the costs are lower than the urban areas. So they could just do the minimum. They can just do 10%. They don't have to do math and figure it out. Well, they're actually getting an increase saying that they can do their indirect cost rate can be 15% now. So
that's what we do is
the minimum. So if you did the minimum and you were at 10% for your Part B award, you can go to 15% as of October 1st. For your Part C award, you can go to 15% as of October 1, 2025. It's all October. It's
Yeah,
just
I
what
had what year.
what's the ending number?
It just doesn't help us with money. We need money.
No, yeah, it doesn't help. It doesn't help with like increasing funding. And I haven't heard, and they did say during today's call that the notice of awards for both Part B and Part C grants would be delivered. I think that's what I wrote. Will be delivered by the end of September. However, your program officer has the number. So if you need to know what your notice of award, what your funding amount is, you can contact your project officer and they'll provide that information to you. So I don't know if there's COLAs this year, cost of living adjustments. I don't know if there's any small increases. I don't know any of that information. So
I haven't heard of any, but who knows? They could be keeping that.
might be a little pleasant surprise, and it's probably not enough to, write home about.
Oh.
It's not like 500 million for 5 core services or anything like that. I can tell you that much. It's not that.
All right.
But so that was one of the big things that came from that call. And they also talked a lot about their different types of reviews and monitoring, and what might trigger those types of things. It's all recorded and will be available on ILRU's website on Friday, I believe. So, but that's why I was late.
Did they mention how many spills have been approved?
So as of today, they're going with the majority. That's the word they're using. That's what I wrote. Majority. I can tell you as of a week and a half ago, almost 2 weeks ago, I have actual numbers on that day. There's still a few states or territories who have not submitted their spill. I think they were down to about 4. So they are closely working with those states and territories I don't know who they are, to receive those. And a majority have been approved. And if there isn't an official approval at this point in time, there will be a conditional approval. So the current spill that we are operating on will expire on September 30th of 2024. So we're supposed to have a new spill in place by October 1 of 2024. So to ensure that people have time, if there needs to be revisions to what was submitted back in June, to ensure that they have time to make any changes, there will be conditional approvals through December to allow folks whatever time they need to get things in place. But what we're being told now is that a majority have been approved. There are some that need small or slight revisions. The example that they used is the match was put in the wrong box on the table of the financial plan in section 1.5. I don't know. If you haven't heard from your project officer, you can reach out. There's also, if you haven't got a notification to Q90, you can reach out. If you haven't got a notification from Q90, you can just log into the portal and you might be surprised when it says your spill was approved. Then you'll be like me because I didn't get notice.
Really? Oh, yeah, because
I submitted it too early. That's what they say.
Yeah, because I had Q90 and my project officer tell me it was approved. So
good.
I was happy.
And there will be a formal letter. So you might have already been told that you were approved or found that you were approved in the portal. There will be a formal letter that comes from ACL before the end of September.
Okay. Thank you for that. I know that wasn't actually advocacy, but I was just curious. I don't want to take over the advocacy meeting with that, so I'm sorry.
You're fine.
What do you have with advocacy besides that, Brooke?
What do I have? We held I'm calling it the first, but it's the first since I've been in Region 10, so 5 years. We held the first Region 10 IL conference last week in Bend, Oregon, and we had participation from all 4 states, so Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. We had participation from all 4 silks, all state silks, and about half, if you add all the centers together in those areas, about half of the centers. So we had all centers from Idaho, 6 of the 7 from Oregon, 2 of the 4 from Washington, and 1 of the 3 from Alaska. But if you just kind of add them all together, we had more than half. Arius was there, so he could talk about it. Nothing like calling you out, Arius. So it was really great. We had all of our national partners came and provided presentations or information. So we did have Joan, the executive director from April, came and presented and networked with folks. We had Jessica Bedozva from Nickel come and present. We had our program officer from ACL, Hiab Burhan, come, and he actually presented each day. So it was a 3-day event, and he gave us a presentation a day. And then we had ILRU come, and they did 2 different presentations. It was the first ever, Catherine. So I don't know if I want to take it on as an annual thing. I think it might be better as like a biannual every other year. It's a lot. So we had we had 72 people registered. So it was a really great event. And we talked about, I think because we're all in the West, so we don't hear as much on a national level when it comes to advocacy and public policy and like the federal regs. So it was nice to bring everyone together and bring those national speakers to us, instead of we always are trying to go to the national level places. So I will say that there are centers who have never heard for the 5 for 5 campaign, which is $500 million for the 5 core services. I want to say it kicked off about 1.5 years ago. Wasn't this last spring? So it was spring of 23. And there are centers who have never heard of it, because if they don't have national exposure, they're not going to hear about those types of things. And so that was good. To just increase what is even being done on a national level, and to also learn how the things that you're doing on a local or state level also impact the national level. Because I think a lot of times it's hard to draw those connections and connect those dots, like what I did in my state or in my town, how does that have anything to do with the national level? But there really is a lot of connections that can be drawn, and a lot of data and information that needs to be collected to be able to advocate on a national level. Because at the end of the day, like regardless of who you're asking money for, they want to know the outcomes or the impact, or they want to know what you're going to do with those dollars and how that's going to affect their constituents. And so if we can somehow like connect all those dots and create better data consistency, I think that we would be more successful in advocating for increased funds.
I agree with that. Yeah. I almost think each area should have conferences like that. So that way, then when you go to a national conference, then you kind of had those mini conferences and you have that knowledge, right?
Yeah, you should plan one in region. What are you, 7?
7. But I was
Yeah.
almost, when you were talking about that, I was thinking we've tried to do that before, and they were like, we're not gonna do that. And
So
like,
if you invite them and you create a good program and you feed them, they will come.
I was thinking though, what if I did region 7 and the region below me, and the region above me? So it's like the whole tornado alley, basically.
Is that what you're going to call it?
Tornado.
The Tornado Alley IL conference? I don't know if I want to come to that one.
Well, that would make people come. It really would. Have the turn
Oh,
experience. Yes.
you could call it like storm chasers or twisters or
Yeah.
something.
But it would go from North Dakota all the way down to Texas. You know, I think that could work.
So Catherine, this conference was for anyone in IL. So we had Silks, we had Sunners, a few of our blind agencies. So Oregon and Idaho's Commission for the Blind folks participated. We didn't get our DSCs. So, and I think that in some states that was intentional. Oregon's DSC showed up at the very end, but that's because we were also having our council meeting following the conference. And so he wasn't able to make it to the conference, but he came for like the last little bit when they were talking about state advocacy. We had a Silk director who used to be a center director come and present. He's also a consultant contractor for ILRU. So he was already at our conference presenting for them. And he talked about the success that their state had in requesting additional state funding. And there was some talk in that presentation about the DSCs, and my DSC was in the hallway for most of that. So when he came in, he said, "So who do I need to make friends with? Because I heard what they were saying about the DSCs." So I was like, well, I can introduce you to these folks, but they're going to go home this afternoon, so you won't have to worry about it. So anyway.
I just want to make sure we end on time so we don't have our interpreter going past an hour.
Where are you at, Catherine? Sorry. Oh, very nice. I get it. Cool. Was it your whole state or your whole region? Oh, very nice. Yeah, we did a statewide one last year. I know I'm used to be from Utah. They do a state one every year as well. So, but this was the first one that I had been a part of that was the region. And if you asked me last week or before, I said, if I ever think I'm going to do this again, just remind me why I'm not. And then by like Wednesday of last week, I was like, it's kind of like childbirth. Just wait, 6 to 9 months. And if you ask me, I will have forgotten all of the stress that it caused, and I'll probably do it again. So.
So if there's, yeah.
Yeah, I guess that would be a question. How many states have some type of conference or training or technical assistance within their spills? So we write it in ours, and then we can allocate funding towards it. So it's one of our goals that within our state plan, and it was in last plan, and it's in the current upcoming plan. And it says that it's kind of broad, but it just says within the spill period, the silk or within the SIL period, the IL network will hold at least one conference.
We used to, but they never did it, so they took it out. I am gonna have to wrap this up though, because I get in trouble if we go over.
Okay.
I mean, I don't actually get in trouble, but I get in trouble. I'm just saying.
Well, we don't want you to get in trouble.
Yeah. And I know that she was supposed to come back. Where is she? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Are there any final thoughts before we go? Because I enjoy talking to y'all, and we can think of agenda items for next month. Just send them to the April email that's out there.
April email that's out there.
Is there an April email out there? Probably not. We need to have an advocacy at april.rural.org, right? But we don't have that. At the board meeting, I'm gonna have one set up. How about that? That makes sense.
Write that down.
And I am gonna get my own self in trouble because I'm not shutting up. All right. Thank you all. We will see you in October.
Sounds good.
Thanks all.
Thanks. Bye.